January 14th, 1945. Belgian-German border. The shell came in screaming. I was in the foxhole when the world compressed into a single point of sound and fury. The ground bucked like a living thing. Frozen dirt showered down, mixing with snow that had turned gray from weeks of artillery and exhaust fumes. My ears rang so loud I couldn't hear myself breathing, just that high-pitched whine that meant you'd been too close to something that should have killed you. When the ringing faded enough to matter, I heard Kowalski throwing up in the hole next to mine. Private Eddie Kowalski from Detroit, 18 years old, in country 3 weeks. He'd been vomiting after every barrage since we crossed into Belgium. Nobody said anything about it anymore. I pulled myself up to the rim of the foxhole and looked toward the command post, where the command post had been. The shell had landed dead center on Captain Hendricks' position. There wasn't much left to see. Smoke rose in a lazy column, black against the white sky. The radio was gone. The map table was gone. Captain Hendricks was gone. So was Lieutenant Morrison, who'd been standing right next to him going over the attack plan for Hohenfels. My hands started shaking, not from cold, from understanding. Carwood. That was Sergeant Buck Talley, crawling up beside me, his face gray under 3 days of beard. You seeing what I'm seeing? Yeah. That makes you senior NCO. I know. That makes you in command of Baker Company. I looked at him. Buck was 42, from some farm in Oklahoma. Been in since North Africa. He'd seen Kasserine Pass. He'd seen Sicily. He'd earned the right to command. But he'd also taken shrapnel in the leg at Mortain, walked with a limp now, couldn't keep pace with an advance. Command needed someone who could move. That was supposed to be Captain Hendricks. Now it was me, Thomas Carwood, 28 years old, coal miner's son from Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, enlisted December 42, promoted to staff sergeant after the Bulge because everyone above me had been killed or wounded. I'd never asked for stripes, never wanted them. The Army gave them to you when enough people died and you were still breathing. How many we got? I asked Buck. 73 effectives. Maybe. Half of them replacements who came in last week. 73 men. Captain Hendricks had started the Bulge with 140. We'd bled down to this through Bastogne, through the counterattack, through 2 weeks of frozen hell where the Germans threw everything they had left at us, and we threw it back until both sides were too exhausted to do anything but stare at each other across frozen fields. Now we were here, 3 miles from the German border, tasked with clearing resistance from villages that intelligence said were lightly held. Intelligence had been wrong about everything since December. Orders? Buck asked. I didn't have any. Captain Hendricks had the orders. Captain Hendricks was scattered across 20 yards of Belgian mud. Then I heard boots crunching through snow. Major Paul Decker from Battalion HQ moving up the line with his radio man. He stopped when he saw the smoking crater, took in the situation with eyes that had seen this exact scene 100 times before. Who's senior here? His voice was flat, tired. Staff Sergeant Carwood, sir. Decker looked at me, really looked, like he was measuring whether I had what it took or whether he needed to pull someone from Dog Company to take over. You know the objective? Hohenfels village. Secure before nightfall. That's right. Jerry's been using it to spot for their artillery. We take it. We blind them for the next push. He pulled out a map, already marked with Hendricks' notes. Intelligence says maybe 20-30 defenders. Probably Volkssturm, old men and boys. But assume they're dug in good. I studied the map. Hohenfels sat in a shallow valley, stone buildings clustered around a church with a damaged spire. One road in from the west, another heading east toward the German lines. Fields on 3 sides. Tree line to the north. Straight assault? I asked. That's up to you, Sergeant. You're in command. Decker folded the map and handed it to me. But I need that village by 1900 hours. Division wants to move artillery forward tonight. He started to leave, then stopped. Hendricks was a good officer. He'd want you to do this smart, not brave. Bring your boys home. Then he was gone, crunching back through the snow toward battalion, and I was standing there with a map and 73 men and about 5 hours of daylight left. Buck was watching me. So was Kowalski. who'd stopped puking and climbed out of his hole. So was every man within earshot, all of them waiting to see what the new guy in charge would do. I folded the map and put it in my jacket. "Get the squad leaders. We're moving in 20 minutes. The plan came together in my head while the sergeants gathered around. Sergeant Joe Mallory from 3rd Squad, short and compact, steady. Sergeant Paul Winters from 1st Squad, lanky kid from Minnesota who'd made rank 3 days ago when his predecessor caught a sniper round. Corporal Alvin Davies, technically not a squad leader but the only other NCO with combat time, running what was left of 2nd Squad after we'd pulled survivors together. I laid out the map on the hood of a burned-out half-track. Here's how we do this. No frontal assault. We don't have the numbers and they'll cut us apart coming across those fields. I traced the tree line with my finger. We move up through here. Use the woods for cover. Get within 100 yards before they spot us. Mallory, your squad sets up a base of fire on this rise. Keeps their heads down. Winters, you take your boys around the north side. Come in along this stone wall. Davies, you're with me, straight up the middle once they're focused on the flanks. What about smoke? Mallory asked. We've got 6 canisters left. We pop them here and here. I pointed to positions that would screen our advance. Drive them back into the buildings. Then it's house to house. What if they're not Volkssturm? Davies asked quietly. What if they're SS? That was the question nobody wanted to ask. The Waffen-SS didn't surrender easy. They fought to the last man, or they counterattacked. Either way, you paid in blood. Then we fight SS, I said. But we fight smart. Use the smoke, use the buildings, don't give them clean shots. Move fast, move together, and for God's sake don't bunch up. I looked at each of them. This isn't a suicide run. We take that village because we have to. But we do it by making them think we're a whole battalion coming down on their heads. Make noise. Move like you've got support. Shoot and displace. Act like you own that ground and they're the ones in trouble. Winters smiled despite himself. Psychological warfare. Exactly. Now get your men ready. We move out in 15. The approach through the woods took an hour. 73 men moving in tactical column, weapons at the ready, every eye scanning for tripwires and ambush positions. The forest was dead silent except for our breathing and the crunch of snow under boots. No birds, no wind. Just cold that seeped through every layer until your bones ached. I moved near the front with Davies and his squad. The corporal was 24 from Virginia, had kind eyes that had seen too much. He'd been the one who'd pulled me out of a shell hole during the bulge when I'd been too concussed to move. We'd had each other's backs since. You really think this'll work? He asked quietly. It has to. We reached the wood line and I called a halt. Through the trees I could see Hohenfels. The village looked dead. No smoke from chimneys. No movement in the streets. The church spire tilted at an ugly angle where artillery had clipped it weeks ago, but I'd learned not to trust quiet villages. I signaled Mallory to set up his base of fire on the rise overlooking the main road. Winters moved his squad into position along the northern approach. Davies spread his men in a skirmish line behind me. Then we waited. 5 minutes, 10. Watching for any sign of life down there. Maybe they pulled out. Kowalski whispered beside me. Maybe. A dog barked, just once, somewhere in the village. Then I saw movement, a figure in field gray, crossing between 2 buildings, carrying something, rifle or maybe a Panzerfaust. He disappeared into a doorway, not abandoned, occupied. I pulled out the signal flare, the red one that meant commence attack, held it up where Mallory and Winters could see. This was it, the moment where you stopped planning and started doing, where everything could go perfect or catastrophically wrong and you wouldn't know which until it was over. I fired the flare. It arced up into the gray sky, trailing red smoke. Then all hell broke loose. Mallory's squad opened up with everything they had. Machine gun fire raked the buildings. Rifles cracked in rapid succession. The noise was enormous, hammering across the valley. I popped smoke and threw the canister forward. Then another. White clouds billowed up, screening our advance. Go! 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 We moved out of the tree line at a dead run, weapons up, spreading across the field in a ragged line. The smoke swallowed us. I couldn't see more than 10 feet in any direction. Just shapes moving beside me, boots pounding frozen ground. German fire started coming back. Muzzle flashes in windows, the crack of Mauser rifles, sharper than our M1s. A machine gun opened up somewhere to the left, tracer rounds cutting orange lines through the smoke. Someone screamed. I didn't look back. We hit the first stone wall and dropped behind it. Davies was on my left, breathing hard. Kowalski on my right, eyes wide but still moving. Down the line I could see others, at least a dozen, maybe more. Winters is in position, someone shouted. His squad opened fire from the north, catching the Germans in a crossfire. Now they had threats from 3 directions, couldn't focus on any single one. I looked over the wall. The nearest building was 30 yards away, bullet holes in the plaster, door hanging open. Davies, take 4 men, clear that house. Kowalski, you're with me, next building over. We moved in pairs, bounding forward while others covered. The German fire was getting less organized, more scattered. They were falling back, pulling into defensive positions deeper in the village. That was good. That meant they were reacting to us instead of executing a plan. The first house was empty. The second had 3 Germans in the cellar, old men with Volkssturm armbands, who dropped their rifles and raised their hands when we came through the door. We zip-tied them and moved on, building by building, room by room. It was brutal, close work. You never knew what was on the other side of a door. Sometimes it was empty, sometimes it was terrified civilians. Twice it was Germans with weapons who died in close quarters exchanges that were over in seconds. By the time we reached the church, we'd cleared half the village and taken 15 prisoners. Our casualties were light. 1 man with a leg wound from shrapnel, another with a concussion from falling through a damaged floor. Better than I'd hoped. Much better. Carwood. Mallory came running up, breathing hard. We got maybe 30 more prisoners in the church basement. They surrendered when Winter's squad came in the back. 30 prisoners. That was more than we'd expected to find total. Any SS? Couple of them looked regular Wehrmacht. Rest are definitely Volkssturm. Old guys? Teenagers. I followed Mallory to the church. The prisoners sat on the floor in rows, hands on their heads, guarded by 6 of Winter's men. They looked exhausted, beaten. Some were crying quietly. Then I saw him, in the back of the group, sitting very straight, not looking at us, mid-30s, lean face. His uniform was different. Not Wehrmacht, not Volkssturm, SS field gray, death's head insignia on the collar, barely visible under dirt. My stomach went cold. Mallory, how many SS? I counted 7, maybe 10. I scanned the prisoners again. He was right. Mixed in among the old men and boys were younger soldiers. Harder faces, SS runes on uniforms they'd tried to cover with mud and dirt. These weren't broken defenders. These were Waffen-SS who'd surrendered tactically maybe, or been overrun, but they carried themselves different. Alert, watching, calculating. And we'd just captured 47 prisoners with 73 exhausted men. We need to secure this position, I said to Mallory. Get wire on the windows. Set up firing positions. Davies, I want you and 6 men guarding these prisoners. Don't take your eyes off them, especially the SS. Davies nodded, understanding the weight of it. I looked at my watch. 1,800 hours. We'd taken the village with an hour to spare. No major casualties. Objective secured. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt wrong. Something about those SS prisoners. The way they sat there. Too calm, too organized even in captivity. But Major Decker needed this village secured so artillery could move up. That meant clearing the perimeter, making sure no German stragglers could counterattack during the night. Davies, you got this? Yes, Sergeant. I'm taking the rest of the company to sweep the eastern approaches. We'll be back in 30-40 minutes tops. I looked at the 6 men Davies had with him. All replacements. Kowalski, who'd been vomiting in a foxhole that morning. Private Raymond Chen from California. Private Marcus O'Toole from Boston. 3 others whose names I was still learning. Green troops guarding hardened SS. But we didn't have a choice. We didn't have enough men to do this any other way. You need more men? You fire 3 shots rapid. We'll come running. Davies checked his Thompson, made sure a round was chambered. "We'll be fine, Sergeant. Go secure that perimeter." I took one last look at the prisoners. The SS officer in the back met my eyes for just a second. His expression didn't change, but something in that look made my skin crawl. Then I turned and led the rest of Baker Company out of that church, out of that village, into the frozen fields beyond. That was my mistake. I wouldn't realize it for another 40 minutes, when I came back and found something that shouldn't have been possible. By then, it would be too late to do anything except fight or die. And when a Hauptsturmführer put a pistol against my stomach and said something in German I didn't understand, when every calculation said I was dead, when surrender meant watching my men executed like at Malmedy, that's when I did something nobody expected. I laughed. We were gone 43 minutes. I know because I checked my watch when we left the church and I checked it again when we came back. 43 minutes to sweep the eastern edge of Hohenfels, check the tree line for stragglers, make sure no German observation posts were still operational. We found nothing. Empty positions, abandoned equipment, a foxhole with frozen rations still in it, like whoever had been there had run so fast they hadn't stopped to grab their food. The Germans were pulling back, consolidating. That's what Major Decker had said. Fall back to the Siegfried line, make us pay for every inch of German soil. Fine by me, let them run. We'd taken enough ground for one day. Sergeant Mallory was walking beside me as we approached the village from the east. The light was fading fast now, that gray winter twilight where everything looked the same, where you couldn't tell a man from a fence post at 100 yards. "Think Davies is managing okay?" Mallory asked. "He's solid. Those prisoners aren't going anywhere." But even as I said it, something felt wrong. The village was too quiet. We'd left 73 men here. Even with guards posted and the rest taking shelter from the cold, there should have been noise. Voices, movement, the sounds of an occupied position. Instead, silence. "Sergeant." That was Private Billy Marsh, 20 years old, from Kentucky, walking point. He'd stopped at the edge of the village square, his rifle coming up slowly. I moved up beside him. "What is it?" He pointed toward the church. The door was closed. It had been open when we left, wedged that way because the hinges were damaged. Now it was shut tight. "Could be the wind," Mallory said, but his voice carried no conviction. I looked around the square. 6 buildings visible from where we stood, every window dark. No guards on the church steps where I'd told Winters to post them. No sentry at the corner where Mallory's squad was supposed to be. Nothing. "Combat spread," I said quietly. "Safety's off." The men fanned out, weapons ready, moving into the village like we hadn't just taken it an hour ago, like it was hostile territory again. We reached the church. I put my back against the stone wall beside the door. Thompson ready. Nodded to Mallory. He pulled the door open fast. The interior was dark. That same smell of old stone and mildew and something else now, something sharp. Recent gunfire, maybe. My eyes adjusted slowly. The prisoners weren't in the basement anymore. They were gone, all 47 of them, and in the center of the church, arranged in a neat row with their hands zip-tied behind their backs, were Davies and his 6 guards. They were alive, all of them, kneeling with their heads down, stripped of their weapons and helmets. Kowalski was shaking so hard I could see it from across the room. Private Chen had blood running down the side of his face from a cut over his eye. Behind them, barely visible in the shadows near the altar, stood 10, maybe 12 figures in German uniforms, armed with American weapons, our weapons, M1 Garands, Thompson submachine guns, even a bar. And at the front of that group, standing perfectly still with a Colt .45 pistol in his hand, was the SS officer I'd seen earlier, Hauptsturmführer. I could see his rank clearly now in the dim light. The death's head insignia on his collar seemed to shine. His pistol wasn't pointing at Davies. It was pointing at me. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. My mind was racing, trying to process what I was seeing. How had this happened? Davies wasn't stupid. He'd been in combat. He knew how to handle prisoners. The Germans had been disarmed, secured, guarded, but the Waffen-SS didn't surrender the way other units did. They surrendered tactically. They waited. They looked for openings, and we'd given them 43 minutes. The officer said something in German. His voice was calm, matter-of-fact, like he was giving directions to a train station. He gestured with the pistol, a small movement toward the floor. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the meaning. Kneel down. Put your weapon on the ground. Surrender. Behind me, I heard Mallory's breath catch. The rest of my men were spread across the church entrance, 30, maybe 40 of them, all with weapons trained on the Germans. But the Germans had our boys right there, kneeling execution style. Any firefight would kill Davies and the others first. The officer spoke again, more insistent now, the pistol steady, and that's when I did the math. December 17th, 1944, Malmedy, Belgium. 84 American prisoners of war executed in a field by Waffen-SS troops from the 1st SS Panzer Division. Shot down in cold blood, left in the snow. We all knew about Malmedy. Every man in the ETO knew. The word had spread fast. SS doesn't take prisoners. SS doesn't follow the Geneva Convention. SS kills. And here I was, looking at an SS officer who'd just recaptured his own men using ours as hostages. And he was telling me to surrender. If I surrendered, we were dead. All of us. My entire company. Davies, Kowalski, Chen, Mallory. Every man who'd survived the Bulge and Bastogne and 2 months of frozen hell. Dead in a Belgian church because I'd been stupid enough to leave green replacements guarding hardened SS. If I didn't surrender, we'd have a firefight that would kill Davies and his boys first, then turn into a close-quarters massacre where nobody won. No good options. No tactical solution. Just math that said I was about to die one way or another. The officer said something else. His tone was changing now, getting harder. The pistol came up slightly, aimed at my chest instead of my stomach. Behind him, the other Germans tensed. I could see their fingers on triggers. They were ready. They'd done this before. This was tactical for them. Capture the American leader, force surrender, retake the village, slip back to German lines with intelligence and weapons, and a story about how 10 SS troopers pulled off the impossible. They were probably right. Mallory whispered beside me, so quiet I barely heard it. "Tom, what do we do?" I didn't answer. I was watching the officer's eyes, calculating, looking for any gap, any opening, anything that might shift the odds even a fraction in our favor. There was nothing. He took a step forward. Now he was maybe 10 feet away. Close enough that I could see his face clearly. Mid-30s, lean, hard lines around his mouth, eyes that had seen too much and felt too little. He said something else in German, slower this time, like talking to a child. Then he took another step. Now he was close enough to touch. The pistol came up and pressed against my abdomen right above my belt. Cold metal through the fabric of my jacket. His other hand reached for my Thompson, fingers closing on the barrel, and I realized something. He thought this was over. He thought he'd won. Thought the American sergeant would fold because the math was impossible. Because the smart play was surrender even if it meant death. Because resistance was pointless. He thought I was rational. Behind me, I could feel my men tensing, waiting. One word from me, and they'd open fire, and we'd all die in this church. No word from me, and we'd all die anyway, just slower, out in a field somewhere with our hands tied. The officer's face was inches from mine now. His breath smelled like cigarettes and something sour. His eyes were flat, emotionless, doing a job. He spoke again. One word this time, heavily accented, but clear enough. Down. Kneel down. And something in my brain broke, not snapped, not shattered, just broke loose from whatever had been holding it together. Some wire that kept you civilized and rational and afraid of death. Because what was the point? What was the goddamn point of being rational when rational meant death? When following the rules meant execution? When doing the smart thing meant kneeling in the mud and waiting for a bullet? We'd been rational for 3 years. Followed orders. Did what we were told. Stood in line and got on boats and crossed an ocean and fought our way through France and Belgium and watched friends die following the rules. And here was an SS officer, part of an organization that massacred prisoners as policy, telling me to kneel down so he could kill me efficiently. The absurdity of it hit me all at once. I laughed. Not a chuckle, not a nervous sound. A real laugh from deep in my chest, loud enough to echo off the stone walls. The officer froze. His eyes widened. Just for a second. Just long enough for me to see him processing this, trying to understand what kind of man laughs when a gun is pressed to his stomach. I laughed again, and I saw it. The flicker. The tiny crack in his certainty. Because laughter meant confidence. Laughter meant I knew something he didn't. Laughter meant this wasn't over, that I had backup he couldn't see, that he'd made a mistake somewhere and was about to pay for it. None of that was true, but he didn't know that. For exactly 2 seconds he hesitated. His grip on my Thompson relaxed. His eyes flicked to the church entrance, looking for the threat that must be there. The reinforcements that explained why this American was laughing instead of surrendering. 2 seconds. I drove my left hand down, hard and fast, knocking the pistol away from my stomach. At the same instant, I yanked the Thompson barrel out of his grip and swung the stock up in a short, brutal arc that caught him under the jaw. Bone cracked. He staggered back. I brought the Thompson level and fired. The burst caught him in the chest at point-blank range. He went down hard, pistol clattering on the stone floor, and then everything exploded. The Germans behind the altar opened fire. My men at the entrance returned fire. Davies and his guards threw themselves flat. Muzzle flashes lit the church interior like lightning strikes. The noise was overwhelming, deafening, rounds ricocheting off stone, shouts in English and German mixing with screams. I dropped behind a pew, working the Thompson's bolt. A round snapped past my head so close I felt the heat. Someone was screaming, high and constant. Couldn't tell if it was ours or theirs. "Grenades!" Mallory shouted. "Get grenades in there!" I saw Private Marsh pull a grenade from his belt, arm it, throw it toward the altar. It bounced once and detonated, the blast wave slamming through the enclosed space, blowing out what was left of the stained glass windows. The German fire slackened, not stopped, just confused, disorganized. I came up over the pew, Thompson ready, and saw one of them trying to reload an M1. I fired a burst. He went down. To my left, Davies had gotten free somehow, was crawling toward a dropped rifle. Kowalski was still on the floor, hands tied, not moving. Chen had blood all over his face, but was trying to reach Kowalski. Another German broke from cover, running for the side door. Mallory cut him down with his carbine. I moved forward, staying low, clearing the spaces between pews. The smoke from the grenade was thick, acrid, making it hard to see. I could hear movement ahead, footsteps on stone, someone cursing in German. Then I saw them. 3 SS soldiers clustered near the altar, trying to organize a fighting retreat to the back exit. They still had their weapons. They were still dangerous, but they weren't in control anymore. I raised the Thompson. "Mallory, Marsh, on me!" We moved as a unit, laying down suppressing fire, driving them back. One of them tried to return fire, and Marsh put 2 rounds through his chest. Another threw down his rifle and raised his hands, shouting something that might have been surrender. I didn't care. The rules broke at Malmedy. They broke when SS troops executed American prisoners. They broke again 5 minutes ago when this Hauptsturmführer pressed a pistol to my stomach and told me to kneel. I fired. The burst caught the surrendering German across the torso. He dropped. The third one ran. Made it to the back door, got it open, disappeared into the twilight beyond. "Let him go," I said. My voice sounded strange, distant, like someone else was speaking. The church fell quiet except for groaning. Someone was wounded bad, sucking chest wound from the sound of it. The air tasted like cordite and blood and pulverized stone. I did a count. Fast, mechanical, the way you do after firefights. Our casualties: Kowalski down, not moving. Chen wounded but mobile. Davies up and functioning. O'Toole holding his arm where a round had grazed him. 3 others with minor wounds. German casualties. I counted bodies. 12. No, 13. The Hauptsturmführer near the entrance. 10 more scattered through the church. 2 that had been behind the altar, torn apart by the grenade. 13 confirmed dead, but there had been more. I'd counted at least 15, maybe 20 in that initial group. The rest had either fled or were hiding somewhere in the village. Mallory, Take 10 men, sweep the village. Anyone in German uniform, you put them down. No prisoners. No chances. He nodded and moved out with a squad. I walked over to Davies. He was sitting against a pew, breathing hard, staring at nothing. You okay? They waited, he said quietly. They waited until we got comfortable. One of them asked for water. Kowalski went to get it. That's when they moved. Fast. Professional. Had us disarmed in seconds. Not your fault. Kowalski. I know. I looked at Private Eddie Kowalski from Detroit. 18 years old. Been in country 3 weeks. He died face down on a church floor, still zip-tied, probably hit by a stray round in the crossfire. He'd been vomiting in a foxhole that morning. Now he was dead. Davies was staring at the Hauptsturmführer's body. You laughed, he said, right before you shot him. You laughed. Yeah. Why? I didn't have an answer, not one that made sense, not one I understood myself. The laughter hadn't been a tactic. It hadn't been psychological warfare. It had just been reaction. Human. Wrong. The sound you make when the absurdity becomes too much and some part of your brain decides that if you're going to die, you're not going to die serious. But it had worked. That 2-second hesitation, that flicker of doubt in the officer's eyes. 2 seconds was all it took. Outside, I heard Mallory's squad firing. Short, controlled bursts. Then silence. He came back 10 minutes later. Found 8 more. They'd taken positions in the buildings around the square, probably planning to ambush when more of our guys showed up. Dead? All of them. 21. 21 enemy killed in approximately... I checked my watch. The whole thing from when I walked into the church to now had taken maybe 8 minutes. Felt like hours. Felt like seconds. 21 SS soldiers dead because I'd laughed at the wrong moment for the wrong reasons, and it had somehow become the right thing to do. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking now. Delayed reaction. Combat adrenaline wearing off, leaving you hollow and sick. Tom, Mallory's voice was soft. We need to secure this position. Set up proper defenses. Report to battalion. Right. Battalion. Major Decker would want to know what happened. How we'd taken the village. Lost it. Taken it back. How we had casualties. How Private Kowalski was dead. How I'd executed surrendering prisoners in a church. Because that's what I'd done. That German who'd thrown down his rifle, hands up, shouting surrender. I'd shot him anyway. That would be in my report, that would be something I'd have to live with. But we were alive. Davies was alive. Most of Baker Company was alive. And those SS bastards who'd planned to execute us Malmedy style were dead. That had to count for something. Get the men organized, I told Mallory. I'll radio battalion. I walked outside. The village was secure now. Properly secure. Dead secure. The sun was completely gone. Full dark. Stars were starting to come out, cold and distant, like none of this mattered to them at all. I thought about Captain Hendricks, what he would have done, whether he would have laughed, whether he would have pulled the trigger on that surrendering German. I'd never know. All I knew was that for 45 seconds in a Belgian church, I'd stopped being a soldier following rules and become something else. Something that laughed at death and killed without hesitation because the alternative was extinction. The SS officer had expected rational, expected surrender, expected me to kneel. Instead, he got whatever I'd become in that moment, and 21 of them had paid for his mistake. I looked back at the church, dark now except for lanterns being lit inside, silhouettes moving, men checking the dead, treating the wounded, securing what was left. Tomorrow we'd move forward, push deeper into Germany, fight more battles, lose more men. But tonight in this village we'd survive something that shouldn't have been survivable, because I laughed when I should have surrendered. And I still didn't know if that made me smart or insane. The official report took 3 hours to write. I sat in what remained of the village mayor's office, a room with half its roof missing and snow drifting through the hole, and tried to put what happened into words that made sense on paper. 06:45 hours, Baker Company moved out to secure Hohenfels village as ordered. Simple, Clean. No mention of how my hands shook the entire approach. 0742 hours. Contact made with enemy forces. Estimated 30 to 40 defenders. The report didn't capture Kowalski vomiting before the attack. Didn't mention the way smoke looks when it swallows men whole. 0831 hours. Village secured. 47 enemy prisoners taken. Minimal friendly casualties. That part was true. For exactly 43 minutes, we'd won. 0914 hours. While securing perimeter, enemy prisoners effected escape and recaptured village interior, utilizing captured American weapons. Effected escape. Like it was magic. Like trained Waffen-SS hadn't waited for the exact moment when green replacements relaxed their guard, then executed a tactical reversal that should have killed every man in Baker Company. 0922 hours. Company commander returned to find guards captured and enemy in control of church position. Hostile engagement followed. Enemy neutralized. Hostile engagement followed. 3 words for what actually happened in that church. For the Hauptsturmführer's pistol pressed to my stomach. For the laugh. For the 2-second gap between being dead and being alive. For 13 bodies in the church and 8 more scattered through the village. Enemy neutralized. 21 men dead in approximately 8 minutes of combat. I'd timed it later, going through the sequence, trying to understand. From the moment I knocked that pistol away to the moment Mallory's squad stopped firing, 8 minutes and 45 seconds. 8 minutes, 45 seconds, 21 enemy killed. 1 American KIA, Private Eddie Kowalski, 18 years old, Detroit, Michigan. I wrote it all down. Facts, numbers, times, positions. What I didn't write was how Kowalski's blood looked on the church floor, how the Hauptsturmführer's face had changed in that instant before I shot him, surprise replacing certainty, how the German soldier who'd surrendered had shouted something that might have been Kamerad before I pulled the trigger anyway. Some things didn't belong in after-action reports. Major Decker read it twice. We were in his command post, a farmhouse basement 2 miles behind the line. He'd aged 10 years since morning. Everyone in Europe looked like that now. Old and tired and done with war. You laughed, he said finally. Yes, sir. At an SS officer holding you at gunpoint. Yes, sir. And that's when you made your move. It created a gap, sir. 2 seconds where he was processing instead of acting. I used it. Decker set the report down, lit a cigarette, didn't offer me one. You know what they're going to say when this goes up the chain. No, sir. They're going to say you're either the bravest son of a bitch in the ETO or you're suffering from combat fatigue and need to be relieved. I didn't respond. Both options felt equally possible. 21 confirmed enemy killed, Decker continued. 0 prisoners taken in the second engagement. That's going to raise questions. They'd already demonstrated they wouldn't honor surrender, sir. Malmedy Protocol. Malmedy Protocol. Decker's expression was unreadable. Is that what we're calling it now? He smoked in silence for a moment. I'm recommending you for a Silver Star. Conspicuous gallantry in action against an armed enemy. Took immediate decisive action when facing overwhelming odds. Saved your entire company from annihilation. Sir, You did your job. Sergeant, you brought your boys home. Most of them anyway. That's all anyone can ask. He crushed out the cigarette. But between us, soldier to soldier, take 3 days. Rest. Get your head straight. Because whatever you did in that church, whatever you became to survive it, you need to make sure you can come back from it. Yes. Sir? I walked out into the night. Baker Company was billeted in houses around the village, actual roofs over their heads for the first time in weeks. I could hear voices through windows. Somebody had found a radio that still worked. Glenn Miller Orchestra playing something slow and sweet. I walked past it all to the church. The bodies had been removed. Ours to graves registration, theirs to a mass burial detail. But you could still see where it happened. Dark stains on the stone floor, bullet holes in the walls, shattered glass from the grenade, scorch marks on the altar. Corporal Alvin Davies was sitting on the church steps, smoking. His hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped hours ago. Can't sleep? I asked. Keep seeing it. The moment they made their move. how fast it was, how professional. I sat down beside him. You did everything right, Davies. They were SS. They train for this. They wait for openings. You couldn't have known. Kowalski's dead because I let my guard down. Kowalski's dead because we're in a war, and sometimes good men die even when everyone does everything right. I took a breath. Don't carry that. War gives you enough weight without adding stuff that isn't yours. He was quiet for a long time. What you did in there, he said finally. The laugh. I've never seen anything like that. It was like you just broke. Like something in you stopped caring whether you lived or died. Maybe that's what happened. Did you plan it? The laugh? Was it tactical? I'd been asking myself the same question for hours. No, it just came out. I was looking at that SS officer and thinking about how we'd done everything by the book, and we were still going to die. How following the rules was going to get us executed like at Malmedy. And the whole thing just seemed absurd. So I laughed. And it worked. It worked because he expected rational. Expected me to calculate odds and surrender because that's what makes sense when someone has a gun to your stomach. I looked at the dark stains on the church floor, visible even in the dim light. But I stopped being rational, stopped following rules, just reacted, and those 2 seconds of confusion gave me the opening I needed. Davies pulled out another cigarette, offered me one. I took it. We smoked in silence, watching snow fall through the broken church spire. Sir? His voice was softer now. That German who surrendered, the one who threw down his rifle. You shot him anyway. There it was, the thing we'd both been avoiding. Yeah. Was that necessary? I thought about it. Really thought about it. No, I said finally. It wasn't necessary, it wasn't tactical, it was just rage. Malmedy rage. They broke the rules first, so we break them back. That's what I told myself in the moment. Do you regret it? Did I? That was the question. The one that would follow me home. Assuming I made it home. The one I'd answer at 3 in the morning for the rest of my life. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me says he was surrendering and I should have taken him prisoner. That's the rule. That's what separates us from them. I flicked ash from the cigarette. But another part of me remembers that 5 minutes earlier, he was pointing an American weapon at American prisoners and getting ready to execute them. So maybe he deserved what he got. Maybe the rules don't apply when the other side throws them out first. Which part do you believe? Both. That's the problem. The snow kept falling. Somewhere in the distance. Artillery rumbled. The war grinding forward, always forward. Germany was dying. Everyone knew it. But it was taking its time, making us pay for every village, every field, every bridge. You staying in after this is over? Davies asked. Haven't thought that far ahead. Me neither. Can't imagine going home. Can't imagine explaining any of this to people who weren't here. He was right. How do you explain to someone who wasn't there what it's like to laugh at death? To kill a man who's surrendering because the rules stop making sense? To carry names like Kowalski and Hendricks and Morrison and all the others who didn't make it? You don't. You just carry it. Quiet. Forever. Sir? Davies stood up. For what it's worth, I'm glad you laughed. Glad you didn't surrender. Because if you had, we'd all be dead right now. So whatever it cost you, whatever it means, thank you. He walked back to the billets, leaving me alone on the church steps. I sat there for a long time. Hours, maybe. Thinking about the Hauptsturmführer's face, the sound of my own laughter in that enclosed space, the weight of the Thompson in my hands, the bodies afterward, so many bodies. 45 seconds. That's all it had really taken. From the moment I knocked his pistol away to the moment the last German fell. 45 seconds of violence compressed so tight that years later, I'd still be able to recall every detail, every sound, every smell, every decision. People think war is about the big moments, the charges, the sieges, the famous battles, but it's not. It's about 45-second intervals where you stop being human and become something else. Something that calculates survival in fractions of seconds. Something that kills without thinking because thinking means dying. And sometimes something that laughs. I finished my cigarette and went inside. Tomorrow we'd move forward, push deeper into Germany, fight more battles. But tonight I was alive. Baker Company was alive. We'd survived the impossible. And I'd learned something about myself I'd never wanted to know. 73 years later, I'm sitting in my living room in Pennsylvania. Same town I left in 1942. Different house, different world. My granddaughter is here working on a school project about World War II. She asked if I'd tell her about my service, what I did, what it was like. I've been avoiding this conversation for decades. Grandpa, she's patient. Gets that from her mother. You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to. No, I say. You should know. Someone should know. So I tell her. Not everything. Not the worst parts. But enough. I tell her about Belgium in winter. About taking command when Captain Hendricks died. About the village of Hohenfels and the SS prisoners who refused to stay prisoners. I tell her about the Hauptsturmführer with the pistol pressed to my stomach. And I tell her about the laugh. You laughed? She's incredulous. When he had a gun on you? Yeah. Why? That's the question. The one I've been asking myself for 73 years. Because it was absurd, I say finally. Because we'd done everything right and we were still going to die. Because the rules didn't matter anymore. Because sometimes the only response to impossible situations is inappropriate laughter. Did you plan it? Like a tactic? No. It just happened. I broke for a second. Stopped being a soldier and became just a guy who found the whole thing ridiculous. And somehow that saved my life. She's quiet. Processing. Was it brave? She asks. No. I'm certain about this. Bravery is when you're scared, but you do the right thing anyway. What I did wasn't brave. It was survival. It was breaking. But you saved everyone. I survived. They're not the same thing. I can see her struggling with this. She wants me to be a hero. That's what grandchildren want. War heroes and clear victories and easy answers. But war doesn't give you those. The thing about that laugh, I say slowly, is that it wasn't heroic. It was human. Maybe too human. I looked at that SS officer and something in my brain just gave up on being civilized, gave up on following rules, gave up on being afraid, and what came out was laughter. Did it haunt you? After? Every day. I look at my hands. Old now, shaking sometimes from age, not fear. I see his face, the way it changed when I laughed, the confusion. He'd expected surrender, expected rational calculation, expected me to kneel like at Malmedy. Instead, he got something he couldn't process, and it killed him. He was SS, Grandpa. He would have killed you. I know. And I'd do it again. That's what makes it complicated. I don't regret surviving. I don't regret saving Baker Company. But I also can't pretend it didn't change me. Can't pretend that 45 seconds didn't turn me into something I'd never wanted to be. She reaches over, takes my hand. You did what you had to do. That's what everyone says. And maybe it's true. But having to do something doesn't make it easy to live with. We sit in silence. Outside, Pennsylvania snow is falling. Different snow. Cleaner. No bodies. No burned villages. No war. Can I ask you something, Grandpa? Sure. If you could go back knowing what you know now, would you still laugh? I think about it. Really think about it. About Kowalski and Davies and Mallory. About the men who made it home because of what happened in that church. About the German soldier who surrendered and died anyway. About the Hauptsturmführer who made a calculation and lost. Yeah, I say finally. I'd laugh. Because the alternative was death. For me and 73 men who deserved to go home. So I'd laugh again. And I'd carry it again. That's what you do. She nods, understanding something she's too young to understand, but trying anyway. Thank you for telling me. Thank you for asking. After she leaves, I sit alone in the living room. The TV is on, but I'm not watching it. I'm back in Belgium, always back in Belgium when the house gets quiet. I'm seeing the church, the prisoners, the pistol. That moment when everything compressed down to a single point and I had to choose between being rational and being alive. I chose alive. And somewhere in that choice I laughed. People ask sometimes about my silver star, about my service record, about whether I'm proud of what I did in the war. I tell them I did my duty, brought my boys home. That's all. What I don't tell them is that home is relative. Your body comes home, your name comes home, but part of you stays there forever, frozen in those 45 seconds when you became something other than human to survive being human. I don't tell them that I still hear that laugh sometimes, in quiet moments, in dreams, a sound that saved my life and haunts it in equal measure. I don't tell them about the German soldier who surrendered, how I see his face sometimes, younger than Kowalski, hands up, shouting something I didn't understand or didn't want to understand. I don't tell them any of that, because some things you carry alone. The snow keeps falling outside my window. Clean Pennsylvania snow. Beautiful. Nothing like Belgium. Nothing like war. I close my eyes and I'm 28 again, standing in that church, feeling cold metal pressed to my stomach, calculating impossible odds, and I laugh, and 21 men die, and I survive. That's the story. That's what happened in Hohenfels on January 14, 1945. A staff sergeant who didn't want command took it anyway, led an attack that succeeded, made a mistake that should have been fatal, faced death and responded with laughter, fought for 45 seconds that felt like forever, killed when he should have been killed, then lived with it. That's all war is, in the end. 45-second intervals of impossible violence, strung together across years, carried forever by people who survived when they shouldn't have. The Germans had me at gunpoint. I laughed. Then they were dead, and I was alive. And 73 years later, I'm still trying to understand which of those outcomes was the blessing and which was the curse. Maybe they're the same thing. Maybe that's what war teaches you, that survival and suffering are two sides of the same coin, and laughing at death doesn't make you brave. It just makes you human. And sometimes, in places like Hohenfels, Belgium, on frozen January days, being human is the most terrifying thing you can be. But it's also the only thing that lets you survive.